Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating geopolitical puzzle. We're looking at the massive gap between what gets promised at the negotiating table and the, gritty reality of actually manufacturing advanced weapons. So the catalyst for today's deep dive is the recent July 28th meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and U.S. President Donald Trump. Coming out of those negotiations, there was this incredibly optimistic announcement, right? They agreed to work on launching the production of Patriot interceptor missiles right there in Ukraine, alongside separate consultations with Lockheed Martin. It sounded like a massive breakthrough. But, as we're going to see, the reality on the factory floor is a whole lot messier than a diplomatic handshake.
So let's dive right into this. Just look at the sheer scale of the Patriot missile system. When we talk about manufacturing these things, we are absolutely not talking about snapping together off-the-shelf parts. No way. We're talking about one of the most sophisticated, highly advanced pieces of defense hardware on the planet. The infrastructure, the laser-like precision, and the proprietary tech needed to build even just one of these systems, it's completely staggering. It's really crucial to keep this immense scale in mind because it perfectly illustrates why localizing production in a new country is such a monumental task.
And that brings us to a really stark contrast. On one hand, you have the expectations set by these high-level political announcements, basically a green light to launch production in Ukraine. But then you hit the reality. And this reality was recently brought to light by some deep dive reporting from the German publication Die Welt. Their analysis shows that actually implementing this project is, frankly, incredibly complicated. It faces major, potentially even prohibitive hurdles. We're going to break down exactly what those roadblocks are, because they give us a really clear window into how modern defense tech actually moves or doesn't move around the globe.
All right, let's get into reality check number 1, the Boeing bottleneck. To really understand this bottleneck, we need to quickly look at the anatomy of the missile itself. The most modern modification of the Patriot is the PAC-3, and the absolute key element, literally the brain of the PAC-3 missile, is its homing head. Now, this specific part is manufactured by the American corporation Boeing. And this isn't just some optional supplementary add-on. This homing head is exactly what allows the missile to track and intercept super complex ballistic targets, specifically systems like the Russian Iskander complexes. Basically, without this one precise piece of tech, you just don't have a functional PAC-3 missile. It's completely non-negotiable. And that brilliantly illustrates our main obstacle here. As Die Welt correspondent Christoph Warner points out, Boeing is currently not showing any willingness to license the production of this component to other countries. I mean, that is a massive roadblock. The entire plan for localizing production in Ukraine completely hinges on transferring these critical technologies. If Boeing says no to licensing this one crucial homing head, the entire production line basically grinds to a halt before a single machine is even turned on.
So where does that leave us? Right now, we're in a total state of limbo. Boeing hasn't officially commented on granting a license specifically to Ukraine to produce these homing heads. And honestly, that silence is heavy. Without that official transfer of technology, the political agreements from July 28th simply cannot magically turn into physical interceptors rolling off an assembly line. But, let's play devil's advocate. Let's say, hypothetically, Boeing grants the license tomorrow. Are we in the clear? Not even close.
Which brings us to reality checks 2 and 3, security and supply risks. The challenges here really start compounding, because getting a yes from Boeing is just step 1. Ukraine would still need access to a whole array of critical tech from several different U.S. manufacturers. And then, you have the physical reality of the war itself. Ukrainian manufacturing facilities are active, high-priority targets for Russian strikes. The risk is so extreme, actually, that they're even considering locating part of the production in Western Europe instead. On top of all that, Washington is actively trying to replenish its very own domestic stocks of PAC-3 missiles. Just imagine this for a second. Trying to build a state-of-the-art, highly sensitive defense enterprise right in the middle of an active war zone, where your adversary knows exactly how valuable that facility is. Establishing production lines for something as advanced as a Patriot missile basically makes that building an immediate giant bullseye for Russian strikes. You aren't just building a factory at that point. You're building a high-value target that needs its own massive, dedicated layer of air defense just to exist. And then you have to zoom out to the broader supply chain friction. Washington is doing this incredible balancing act right now.
There's a sky-high demand for PAC-3 missiles inside the United States itself. The U.S. military absolutely has to restock to maintain its own defense posture, right? So that domestic necessity creates a bottleneck of its own, which can directly slow down the pace of how fast tech and hardware can be transferred to allies. It's classic economics. Demand is just vastly outpacing supply. So you've got tech roadblocks, extreme security threats, and a global supply chain crunch all happening at exactly the same time.
And that leads us to our final and probably most sobering constraint here, the reality of time. Let's just assume the absolute best-case scenario. Say the diplomatic talks work out perfectly. Boeing hands over the Humming head tech, several other U.S. manufacturers give the green light, maybe Western European partners agree to host some factors to lower the strike risk, and Washington somehow perfectly balances its own PC-3 restocking with allied needs. You solve all of those incredibly complex interwoven problems, and guess what? You are still only at the starting line.
1 to 5. That is how many years it could take just to launch serial production. And this isn't some pessimistic estimate from an outside critic. This timeline was noted by the Ukrainian head of state himself, President Zelensky. Even if you have every single license in your hand and every political green light is flashing, establishing specialized production lines, training the personnel, and physically manufacturing these interceptor missiles, that's a process you measure in years, for sure, not months.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative question to ponder. What is the true gap between signing a diplomatic agreement and actually building a complex interceptor missile? As we've seen throughout this explainer, political willpower and handshakes, they're really just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface lies this incredibly dense labyrinth of corporate licensing, specialized supply chains, massive security threats, and the slow, grinding reality of time. It's a pretty stark reminder that in the world of advanced defense, saying you're going to build something and actually building it are two entirely different worlds. Thanks so much for joining me to unpack this puzzle, and I hope this gives you a much clearer lens to view these major international announcements through.